A few years ago, my family and I traveled to Canada for a vacation. As part of our trip, we decided to visit Niagara Falls and enjoy its various attractions. One of them was the famous boat tour that crosses the border between Canada and the US, getting close enough to the falls for passengers to be drenched by the mist from the cascading water. As we walked towards the viewing platforms, my son, who was 8 years old at the time, suddenly stopped and showed an unusual terror. With a face full of fear, he urgently exclaimed, "That water is toxic! It's contaminated! Don't let it touch you!" The people around us looked at him strangely, surprised to hear such a young child speak with so much certainty about something so specific. His reaction was so intense that I had to calm him down, kneeling to his level and explaining softly, "Son, this water was toxic many years ago, but it isn't anymore. The smell is different. It's crystal clear, and the governments of Canada and the US ensure that nothing like that happens again." He trusted me, as every child trusts their father. Slowly, as we continued walking and getting wet from the falls, his fear seemed to fade away. However, destiny had an even greater surprise in store for us. At the end of the tour, exhausted from the long walk and the day's excitement, we decided to enter a movie theater located within the tourist area. They were showing a documentary about the history of Niagara Falls. To our shock, the film began by narrating a dark chapter in the region's industrial past. Years ago, several industries near the falls used to dump chemical and toxic waste into the water. This pollution caused severe environmental damage and in some cases even resulted in deaths due to exposure to hazardous waste. When my son heard this, he turned to me with wide eyes and said with conviction, "See, that's why I told you that water is toxic." At that moment, I realized that what he had felt wasn't just an ordinary fear, but something much deeper. Without hesitation, I responded, "I know, son. It was toxic many years ago, and I never stopped believing in you. Your past life brought this memory to the present." Once we returned home, I researched more about Niagara Falls pollution and discovered that there had indeed been a time when industries had severely contaminated the waters. It wasn't just an environmental disaster, it was also a serious threat to those who worked or lived near the river. Then I asked myself, could my son have lived in that era in a past life? This episode is reminiscent of cases studied by Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker, experts in childhood reincarnation. In many of their investigations, they have documented children who, without any logical explanation, recall historical events or have specific phobias linked to deaths in past lives. In my son's case, he didn't just have an irrational fear of water, he specifically expressed concerns about its toxicity, something an 8-year-old child would hardly know on his own. His reaction was not that of a common fear of water, but that of someone who remembered a real and tangible danger. What's even more curious is that his connection to the past doesn't stop there. Since he was little, he has shown a special affinity for jazz and the aesthetics of the 1950s and 60s, including his way of styling his hair and his love for classical music from that era. These inclinations could be subtle signs of a connection to a previous life. Niagara Falls, one of the world's most breathtaking natural wonders, was not always the pristine tourist paradise we know today. During the Industrial Revolution and up until the mid-20th century, chemical and manufacturing industries in the region dumped dangerous waste into the Niagara River, harming the ecosystem and public health. One of the most notorious disasters was the Love Canal case. Between 1942 and 1953, the Hooker Chemical and Plastics Corporation dumped approximately 21,000 tons of chemical waste into the abandoned Love Canal, which eventually leaked into the Niagara Falls area. In 1953, the Niagara Falls Board of Education acquired the land for $1 and built a neighborhood there, leading to one of the worst environmental disasters in US history. Moreover, in 1970, it was estimated that around 700 industries were dumping nearly 1 billion liters of wastewater into the Niagara River daily. The pollution was so severe that babies were born with congenital defects, leading to a major environmental justice movement. This dark chapter of Niagara Falls history might have left a mark on the soul of someone who lived there during that time. Could it be that my son was one of those people? While mainstream science does not yet fully recognize reincarnation as a proven phenomenon, cases like this make us wonder. My son didn't just feel an irrational fear, his concern was based on a historical reality. Moreover, his affinity for jazz and mid-20th century culture reinforces the possibility that he may have lived in that period in another life. Could his memory have carried an echo of a past experience into this incarnation? As he grows, his fascination with certain eras and his advanced way of speaking remain a mystery to me. Perhaps over time, more pieces of this puzzle will emerge. Until then, I will keep this story as a testament that sometimes souls may remember fragments of who they once were.